What's going on, guys? I'm Tim Kelly. This is Phillies Stoplight, and prior to one of the strangest football games I ever remember watching, certainly on a national stage to begin the season, the Phillies yesterday were able to complete a series win over the Brewers, take 2 out of 3, which is big. Certainly, if you want to keep your hopes alive of potentially getting that number 1 seed, pretty unlikely, but certainly helps you with getting the number 2 seed, which still comes with the bye, and it helps you feel good against the Brewers because that's a team. If you make a run to the World Series, you're probably going to have to go through at some point. So the Phillies take 2 out of 3 here in Milwaukee. There's still some takeaways, though, big picture, that are concerning. Andrew Painter would be one, and I don't even know that Andrew Painter's concerning at this point because it's been a week, 10 days, maybe even a little longer than that I've kind of felt like probably not going to happen this year in terms of him coming up, particularly after you signed Walker Buehler. But I think even Alan Ronhal would probably be coming up over Andrew Painter at this point. The Phillies cannot necessarily shut Andrew Painter down, and Rob Thompson was asked if there's been any thought of shutting Andrew Painter down. He said not that he's aware of something to that effect. His ERA since joining the Iron Pigs, though, is now, he joined the Iron Pigs in May, had been promoted from Single A Clearwater. He's got a 5.62 ERA over 20 starts. It kind of feels like you're at the point in the season where he's made it through this year healthy. It hasn't gone how you hoped in terms of him making an impact for the team, but he's still 22 years old, and you kind of begin to turn the page, and in his case for next year. Now, the Phillies are so thin on organizational starting pitching depth after losing Zach Wheeler, after trading Mick Abel, that they may be in a situation here where even if he's not the first or second call-up, if somebody else in the starting rotation were to get hurt, you can't entirely shut him down right now because you're only an injury or two away from having to have the discussion about bringing him up almost by default. But I do think you're at the point where it's pretty clear that Andrew Painter is most likely not going to play a role for the Phillies unless there is just a major breakdown in starting pitching health. This year, he's not going to play a role for the team. And certainly when you talk about preseason expectations, when you talk about Dave Dombrowski saying on multiple occasions that July-ish was when they could potentially bring him up, and I should say, they never guaranteed he was coming up. It was always if he's performing well, but I think the thought was he was going to be performing very well and he was going to come up, and ultimately that just hasn't happened. And I thought this was an interesting quote from Rob Thompson yesterday. I said, and this was part of a larger conversation pregame that we had with Rob about Andrew Painter and different topics, and I said, it's his first year coming back. He had missed 2 years after Tommy John surgery. He had never pitched at the AAA level. Kind of, was this a situation where maybe the preseason expectations for him weren't managed well or were even unfair to a degree? And he said, well, I think everybody was excited about getting him back. But I think at the end of the day, you look back on it and you say, first time going through this, it usually takes 2 years for a guy to come back. I think we can all look back and think, man, probably should have expected this. And to a degree, though, I think the Arizona Fall League, not that that's MLB competition, or at least current MLB competition, that kind of threw things off because he looked so good there. Didn't pitch in spring training, but he was throwing in spring training, and there was just a lot of optimism about him. And I get it. Like, it seemed like 2 years ago he was going to come up as a 19-year-old, potentially break camp with the team. Then he has the injury. Then he misses 2 seasons, essentially, comes back this year, and he's stayed healthy, the velocity is up, but the control has not been where they've needed it to be. And if you ask me my gut feeling, I think Andrew Painter comes back next year and pitches much more like what the Phillies anticipated they were going to get out of him this year, makes an impact for the Phillies in 2026. But my other gut feeling is that there will be no future timetables put on Andrew Painter, because this is now twice where expectations have gotten extremely high for him. And I mean, the first time he got hurt, there's nothing you can do about it. And this time, I think, to a degree, you can argue there's nothing you can do about it because he hadn't pitched in 2 years. He had never pitched at the AAA level. But by putting some of these timetables potentially out into the world, it makes it seem like a disappointment that he hasn't come up, and it doesn't look like he's going to come up this year. So I think moving forward, the Phillies will say, we have high hopes for Andrew Painter. We believe he's going to be a huge part of our future, but they're not going to put a date on his arrival. He'll kick down the door at some point, and at that point he'll come up. But I would think that that's a pretty easy thing to predict moving forward, that they're not going to put a timeline on. Now, something not easy to predict moving forward is Aaron Nola. I think in a perfect world, Aaron Nola would pitch well enough in this final month of the season where he would be your number 2 starter in the postseason. He's got experience, certainly making a lot of money in year 2 of a 7-year deal. He would pitch well enough that he earns that spot. You break up the lefties. That would be great, but I think as we're finding out, it's not a perfect world. Wednesday here in Milwaukee, he threw 5 innings, 6 earned runs. Now, granted, 5 of those earned runs came in the first inning. He did settle in. There is value in a guy that's able to have a blow-up first inning and still end up going 6 or 5 innings and limiting the damage relatively. But at a certain point, Destiny Legardo pointed this out of Phillies Nation, if that's a playoff game, he's out of the game. He maybe doesn't finish the first inning. So it is valuable to a degree to have a guy that can stay in there and wear one and even to a degree keep you in the game. But he's got a 6.78 ERA after 13 starts. Now, I'm not here to say that Aaron Nola is cooked, but what I will tell you is I just can't fathom right now, unless there's a drastic change over these final few weeks of the season, handing him the ball in game 2 just because he's right-handed or just because he has experience. I think it may not be ideal to go with 3 straight lefties, and maybe you have some concerns about Luzardo or about velocity for Ranger Suarez, although he looked good in his most recent start. But I think right now you have to roll with Christopher Sanchez, Ranger Suarez, and Jesus Luzardo. Say that Ranger Suarez is good enough or different enough that you kind of break up 2 guys that are a little more power type pitchers in Christopher Sanchez and Jesus Luzardo. They would go game 1 and game 3. Ranger Suarez, who is extremely experienced now in the postseason, would go in game 2, and you kind of figure it out from there. Now, this is contingent on you getting that first round bye, in which case you don't need a 4th starter until the NLCS, and you cross that bridge when you get there. I would still think when you get there, that's going to be Aaron Nola. I guess it could be Taijuan Walker, it could be Walker Buehler, could be Alan Ronhell. And in the grand scheme of things, it's probably going to turn into some sort of a bullpen game, even if it's not announced as that. If Nola pitches or Walker Buehler or whoever, like you're talking about them probably going one time through the rotation. It's not ideal, but you got to get there first. And to me, based on the way Aaron Nola's pitched this year, I just can't imagine him going in one of those. Maybe that changes, but I just think you're at a situation here. A 6.78 ERA in September. I know he missed a bulk of this season, but I'm just not sure how you can start him in game 2 or game 3 even right now. I think you roll with Sanchez, Suarez, and Luzardo, and you see where you're at from there, and you hope that Aaron Nola bounces back because he's got 5 more years left on a pretty lucrative contract, and you hope you get better results from him. But I don't think you can just pitch him game 2 just because he's right-handed or just because he's had an excellent career. If he's getting these type of results and you're worried about getting in a 5-0 hole in the first inning, I think you have to make a tough decision here, and that might mean that Nola doesn't start in the first playoff series, and you circle back in the NLCS if you get there. Speaking of some tough decisions, Nick Castellanos was out of the lineup for the second time in 3 games on Thursday, and despite having really good numbers against Freddie Peralta, despite having 2 hits in the game on Wednesday, he was out of the lineup Thursday, despite having 2 hits in the game on Wednesday when he did get the start. And Rob Thompson was asked about whether it is a platoon at this point, and he said, well, it looks that way. I mean, call it whatever you can call it whatever you want, but at this point in the year, I'm going to put out what I think is the best lineup on any given day to win a ball game. Yeah, there's still a bit of a rotation if you want to call it that. If you want to call it platoon, doesn't matter to me. So he's at the point where he is going with what he believes is the best lineup. And I think there's a strong case against right-handed pitchers. Nick Castellanos has an OPS under 700 this year. Obviously, the defensive struggles have been well documented. I don't think there's any question anymore that Harrison Bader should be in center field pretty much every day. He made another tremendous catch, whether that would have been a home run or a triple or a double. He robbed extra bases in the ninth inning in a close game yesterday. So Bader in center field, I don't think there's a lot of questions. You're going to have Marsh in left field most games. Weston Wilson has had some questionable defensive plays, but he hit a titanic home run on Wednesday. So he is hitting against left-handed pitchers as a guy that occasionally spells Marsh in there in left field against lefties. So I think that's your platoon in left field, and then your platoon in right field becomes Max Kepler, who has hit since the beginning of August, and Nick Castellanos. And it's not ideal. It's uncomfortable. You have a guy that played 162 games last year, is in the fourth year, which is not the final year of a 5-year, $100 million contract. I think it's at the point where you're going to have to make a decision with him in the offseason about how you proceed. And I would be surprised if that decision includes him continuing in Philadelphia, because are they going to guarantee him he plays 162 games next year if healthy? Probably not. Are they going to guarantee him he'll never come out for a defensive replacement? Probably not. And in that case, he may want to go elsewhere. He's his agent, so that makes it probably even a little bit more awkward. But I think both sides do what they do for the rest of the season. You find a way to make this work and potentially win a World Series and keep things from going off the rails. But it's an uncomfortable situation, and I understand from his perspective that this is frustrating for him. But I also get from Rob Thompson's perspective that you're trying to win a World Series, and right now your best lineup in some cases maybe doesn't include him. So it's another storyline to watch as the season goes on. We will have full coverage of everything. Eagles season obviously started. Phillies down the stretch. Sixers and Flyers not far from getting going. Check out everything on Pattison.com, and I will talk to you guys next time.